Welcome to Colors of Life. Today we'll be talking about addiction. Addiction has been defined as a condition or the fact of being addicted to a substance or an activity. The WHO estimates that 3.3 million deaths are as a result of substance addiction yearly. But my guest is going to be telling us more about addiction. She's going to show us that addiction is not just about drugs, but in various areas of life. So we're welcoming Reverend Christie Bature Obefu. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're a woman of many parts. Mm-hmm. You're a minister of the gospel, I know you are. You sing. You're a life coach, but you're also licensed to work with addicts, and you actually have a rehab center. So tell us about your rehab center in Port Harcourt.
Oh, well, it was born out of the huge and glaring need to reach out to people who were struggling. And there's a lot of what I would call it misconception or misunderstanding about addiction. People mistake it for psychosis. So when you talk about addiction, they immediately think of madness. But that's not what it is. An addiction is just a habit that has gone out of hand. There are good and bad addictions. I usually make a joke and say I'm looking for prayer addicts.
I like
people who just pray until something happens, and that's good addiction. Reading can become an addiction, and it's a good addiction. But there are also the ones that can be considered vices, and one of them is drug addiction. Growing up, I was surrounded by addiction, just that I didn't know the name for it at that time. Mm-hmm. I was just confused by the lives I saw waste away. Minds that were powerful, just becoming almost like vegetables, reduced to unproductive members of society. And I didn't know this was called addiction and if there was anything anybody could do about it. My immediate family, my family of origin was cut down by addiction. I lost 4 sisters to addiction, my father to addiction, and probably one of my brothers, because we still don't know what took him, but his lifestyle could have contributed to his strange death, which was just 2 weeks ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay. Over a period of, 17 years, I've lost 6 members of my family to addiction.
What type of addiction is this?
Okay, my dad died from cirrhosis of the liver and congestive heart failure, and it came from years of heavy drinking. Okay. One of my sisters, my older sister, died from addiction to pentazocine. Pentazocine is medical heroin, which is morphine.
Okay, so that's a painkiller.
It's a painkiller.
Okay.
She had legitimate pain, and in a bid to control that pain, she became hooked on pentazocine. And then 3 of my sisters died to alcoholism and cigarette smoking. At a point, my 2 brothers, I have only 2 brothers, both of them were addicted.
Okay.
But after I started the rehab, one of them came and cleaned up himself. So he's stable now and he's sober. Okay. This other one that died 2 weeks ago actually came to the rehab to clean up himself, but he just fell ill in the rehab. He fell ill in the rehab after about 4 weeks and degenerated so fast and just died. So pain made me to ask questions.
Okay.
And it's in the asking of the questions that I realized that what we went through as a family could have been helped if we knew that we were dealing with a phenomenon and if we knew how to deal with it. I didn't know there was help for such a thing. I didn't know it was possible to even break free from such habits. But when I found out that was possible, I decided, all right, I couldn't help my dad, couldn't help my brother or my sisters, but I could be somebody's help.
And I'm just listening to you, I'm wondering how come you seem to be the only person that didn't get into the addiction in the family.
Jesus,
how come? Okay.
Without hesitation.
Okay.
He saved me at a very early age. I was already drinking with them. We all started way early.
How early?
I started drinking at 2 because that's the age my dad starts to give you to drink.
Wow.
He gave us and the thing overtook us. You understand? But Jesus came into my life when I was 10.
That's what age?
10.
Okay.
That's when I stopped drinking.
Okay.
And this is the only reason I've escaped. There's no other explanation.
So that's what makes the difference?
That's all that makes the difference. secular rehabs will deal with the habit. They would go after the habit and teach you how to break the habit. But I know from personal experience that addiction is two sides of a coin.
Okay.
There's a habit on one side which somebody learned by reason of use. Okay. Is a scripture, who by reason of use have the senses exercised. If you exercise your senses for good, you become an expert at good. Okay. But if you exercise the senses for evil, you also become an expert. So that's one side of addiction. But the other side, I know it's demonically energized.
Okay.
Their demons are assigned because it comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. So the demons are assigned to ensure the absolute destruction of this person. So if you come to a rehab and they can only deal with a habit, the demons are still entrenched. They're in place. Once you come out of rehab, they trigger you and you go down again. And so the Church of Jesus Christ is the only answer to addiction, because we are the ones equipped to deal with both the habit through discipleship and also the demonic engagement by invoking the name of Jesus.
So what are the signs we are to look out for to know that there is addiction? Because I know that this issue of addiction is becoming, there's an awareness more than ever before. It's growing. And it's destroying families, relationships, and all that. So what do we look out for to know that we have to start addressing this challenge?
The most obvious thing to look out for is compulsion, where you have to, even when you know you shouldn't. So that's one. But the classic signs are about 7 of them. Okay. 1, broken promises. Okay. If you've made promise to God, to your spouse, to your children, to your dog, I won't do this again, and you do it, then you need to check that behavior. There's probably an addiction. 2, entitlement. When we have a sense of entitlement concerning any behavior, we feel, oh no, I deserve this because of this. Check, there's probably an addiction there. 3, negative consequences. If you've had any negative consequences over any behavior, you need to check that behavior. 4, what's the other one now? Your failed attempts to change. You've attempted to stop, and you keep going back. That's an indication of an addiction. Ineffective prayer is another indication that something is not right concerning this behavior. And then also there is, your heart knows. You can lie to everybody, but you can't lie to yourself. So those are some of the things that will indicate that there is an addiction. But one of the things that people are unaware of is the doorways through which addictions come. Okay,
so we're going to take a little break.
Okay.
And when we come back, we'll be talking about the doorways, and we'll have a testimony of someone you've worked with.
Yes.
And it's now free.
Colors of life.
We're back on the Colors of Life show, and we have a guest, Christie Bature Ubefu. She's a minister of the gospel. She's a life coach. She also runs a rehab center in Port Harcourt. In the first segment, she'd been talking to us about various types of addiction and the indicators that we may be addicted. This time, she's going to talk to us about the doorways through which addiction may come into our lives, and of course, how we get out of it. We also have a young man, a success story. Chinedu is going to be telling us how he came out of addiction. He was in Christie's Rehab Center in Port Harcourt. So welcome to the show, Chinedu.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And dear Reverend Christie, please tell us the doorways.
Okay. There are a few doorways. There are 3 you will find in the conventional textbooks. But there's one that I added from experience. And I find that in Romans 1:21, because that they knew him as God, but will not honor him as God, neither were thankful, God gave them up. And if you read till the end of that chapter, you find out that they were dealing with addictions. Once God took his hand off of their lives, they fell into addictions. And it came from being ungrateful. It's an ungrateful heart that ignores everybody else and just focuses on itself and pursues an addiction. All right, so that's first doorway, ingratitude.
Okay.
Second doorway is the addictive society that we live in.
Okay.
When I was a child, if they were advertising toothpaste, you saw human teeth. Now they're advertising toothpaste, they're showing me a woman's breast. And I'm wondering, are they going to brush her breast with the toothpaste? I don't understand. Or power bike. They don't show me a man with muscles holding onto that bike. They show me a half-clad woman holding the bike because they're selling sex. If you see a woman crying, my husband committed adultery, somebody will go, is that why you're crying? That's normal. How can you normalize something that is not okay? So the society attempts to shape the thinking. It's an addictive society where we are pushing the envelope farther and farther away from right, as defined by God, to whatever we want. And that's essentially what addiction is, enthroning self over everything else. All right, so the addictive society is also part of the problem. 3 is trauma. This is the second most potent doorway. Personal trauma. Any experience you have that affects you so deeply that you need to find a way to cope will open you up to addiction. Trauma is pain. When you have a headache, you take Panadol. When you have a stomach ache, you take Gelusil or Gestid. That's a body in pain. When the soul is in pain, it will also look for medication. And unfortunately, we have somebody called the devil who presents everything else but God. And this is what opens us up to addiction. The drugs, the sex, the whatever affords you a numbing. It numbs your pain. So you go back to it again and again and again. And then the final doorway, which is the most potent, is family dysfunction. Okay. And 90% of the young people that come to the rehab have family dysfunction at the root of their struggle. If you look through the Bible, you'll find that running very strongly.
So what are the traits of family dysfunction?
Neglect, abandonment, and abuse.
Okay.
It could be emotional neglect, it could be spiritual neglect, it could be physical neglect. It could be sexual abuse, it could be physical abuse, it could be emotional or psychological abuse.
I'm just, as I'm talking to you, I'm thinking of an addiction that is prevalent in today's world and from which probably none of us is spared, particularly the younger people, and that's addiction to
social media.
Social media.
Yeah, well, it's an escape.
Okay.
When you watch a movie, you get so caught up in the story.
Yeah.
Sometimes when the movie ends, you feel sad.
Okay.
Because you don't want to come out of that fantasy world that was created by that. So the social media is an escape. It's where you go to just forget.
Reality.
Yeah.
Now, before we go to how do we get out of it, let's take Chinedu's story. Chinedu, would you like to tell us how you became addicted? It's painkillers in your case. How you got into that and how you came out of it.
Thank you very much. It was back when I was in school. I had pains on my leg, so I was introduced to pentazocine. It's a painkiller. It's in the family of morphines and the rest, the likes of them. Those are like really hard painkillers, yeah? So over time, it had this effect. It had a cooling effect, just likewise to cocaine.
Okay.
It makes you calm, it makes you numb, you just forget about, get high too, you just forget about several.
Is it the same thing like codeine? Because I know recently there was a sweet codeine.
Okay. Codeine is an opiate. This is one of
yeah, but so that was where I found myself at a particular time. But with such things, your life gets stagnated without you realizing that you ain't moving forward. So I made up my mind. I made up my mind that I needed to do something different. I needed to move forward because it was dawning on me that this was no escape.
Okay.
Yeah, so...
so can I take you back a little bit? So what dosage were you on for the pain and for how long? And then at what point did it become addiction?
Talking about the dosage, it comes in like the Forex rise, you find yourself, because it's an injection.
Okay.
Actually. So you find yourself taking a bottle.
Okay.
The next minute you're taking 2 bottles, the next minute you find yourself. But at the point where I found myself, I could do like 2 packs in a day.
And each pack has 10 ampoules.
10 ampoules inside of them.
Wow.
So
20.
So 20 could get down.
Let me
and medically, what's the dosage that you're meant to take?
Medications like that are used for extreme pain. And they will not let you stay on it for more than 48 hours at a time. They stop and give you a less addictive one. And even in that 48 hours, you take maybe 1 ampoule every 8 hours.
Okay.
So you are getting 3 in 24 hours, and he was doing 20
In
24 hours.
Wow, that's serious.
For 3 years, right?
Yeah, 3 years.
And then you went into the 360, is it 180 degrees?
180. 180 degrees rehab center.
Yeah. House on the Rock, Port Harcourt then, I used to volunteer with them.
House on the Rock, Port Harcourt. Okay.
Yeah. So,
was it there you learnt about the rehab center?
yeah, they had ties with her.
Okay.
Friendship ties, because she come to church pretty most of the time and all like that,
Okay.
and they knew what she did. So they sent me to her. Okay. They shipped me down there for like 2 months.
Okay.
And that was
And
when
so what happened in there that made a difference?
because I wanted a change.
Okay.
That was the first one,
Okay.
which I thought was going to be easy. I go in. So the determination alone that I got was the first fire that that burnt in me.
Okay.
Then the love, because at the time I wanted to quit.
Okay.
I wanted to quit. I wanted to pack my bags and leave. Immediately, the withdrawal symptoms were mad. Like they were
Crazy.
extreme.
Yeah.
It's like I had goosebumps like 24 hours. All the hairs on my skin were standing because I couldn't take this stuff. So the love.
Okay.
The love. You see everybody coming there, like it's as if the whole rehab center was just bent on just this individual that was just going through this at this particular point. She could hear this and she could be at home and she's rushing down to the rehab to find out what's going on.
Okay.
And she's left the family there, and she could spend the whole evening just because she just wants to just feel that relaxed there.
Okay.
So that was something that was fascinating.
So you've been addiction free for how many years?
4 years, 4 years and counting,
And counting.
Yeah, they tell you you're never free, but because it has to keep. There's a memory at the back of your mind that you're prone to this. You cannot deny the fact
Okay.
that your system has been used to this for a particular period of time.
Okay.
Because you can't skip it off your mind. You skip it off your mind, you could find yourself somewhere and become helpless.
So what do you do to prevent a relapse? What practical steps do you take?
I've been writing.
He found an escape.
But tell me, so why do they do, Reverend Christie, why do you do all these exercises?
Once you start abusing a substance, it does what is called, it creates what is called a neurological pathway in your brain. That's why they say you're never free. Those pathways don't go away. It's like acid etching skin.
Okay.
No matter how much plastic surgery you do, you will still see the signs of the scar.
Okay.
So when the drugs have created that pathway, the day you touch that drug, you will go right back to where you were before because the pathway is reactivated.
Okay.
So what those pathways mean is that drug is flooding the body with pleasure hormones.
Okay.
Endorphins, enkephalins, serotonin, all of the oxytocin. They are released into the body every time you take the drug.
Okay.
So that's trying to cope with life by getting the feel-good hormones, which the body produces naturally through illegitimate means or unhealthy ways. That's the drug. So the therapies we have, dance, exercise, massage.
Those are legitimate
There are
ways
also
to
ways to
still
release the same
same.
hormones, but in less destructive ways.
Thank you so much. We'll just go on a break before we come back and then talk about how do we get free.
Colors of life.
Welcome back. We've been talking about addiction. We've been talking to Reverend Christie Bature Obefu, who runs an addiction center in Port Harcourt, and Chinedu Frank, who was in that rehab center and is now free from the drug he was addicted to. Now we're going to see how do we get help? How do we get free? Is it possible to be free?
Well, Chinedu is proof
Okay.
that it is possible to be free.
Okay.
The first thing that must happen is the decision of the person.
Okay.
One of the worst things to confront in an addict is denial. Hardly does an addict accept that he has a problem.
Okay.
And as long as you can't break through the denial, you really can't help the person.
Okay.
Once you break through that and the person admits, okay, there's a problem here and I need help, there are a few things that can come into play. One is accountability.
Okay.
part of the reason why we fall into addiction is because in that area of our life, we're accountable to no one. And so the Bible says, woe unto him that falls when he's alone. Because if he has somebody else, it's called the power up principle. So you connect with someone else and become accountable. What do I mean? Some people say to me, oh, I find that I'm using drugs at certain times. So you give somebody the permission to hold you accountable at those times so you don't go to the drug.
Okay.
That's one. Two, prayer. When people come to the rehab, we ask them, what is your faith? And the only people we turn away are the ones who say they are atheists. I don't believe in God. I'm like, if you don't have a higher power whom you owe allegiance to, one, two, whom you believe can help you, we can't help you.
Okay.
So if you say I'm an atheist, you better engage the spirituality of an atheist. If you are a Muslim, engage your spirituality as a Muslim. If you are a Christian, engage. So prayer is powerful. It's been scientifically proven how much prayer changes the person praying.
Okay.
And then three is a retraining of a brain. Every addiction is a training of the brain. The brain, the human brain is designed to pursue pleasure by all means, but it is also designed to run from pain by all means.
Okay.
There's a concept or a phenomenon in philosophy called, or psychology, Pavlov's law of classical conditioning. Pavlov was a man who did an experiment with a dog. He bought a puppy and a bell. Every time he rang the bell, he fed the dog. Ring the bell, feed the dog. After a while, the moment the dog heard the sound of a bell, saliva started pouring out of the mouth because he was expecting food. Okay. So he connected the sound of the bell with pleasure, food. Okay. Then the man switched the experiment. Ring the bell, kick the dog. Ring the bell, slap the dog, inflict pain. It took less time. Once the dog heard the sound of the bell, it took off running because he knew pain was coming. It's the same bell,
okay,
but the stimulus had changed. So every addiction is a training of the brain. The brain associates the behavior with pleasure. So the thing to do is to train the brain to associate it with pain.
Okay.
So one of the most powerful tools of reformation is the rubber band. This same rubber band that you use to tie money, tie our hair.
How?
Rubber
I can't
band.
wait to hear.
So you take 2 rubber bands because one will break easily and wear it on your bracelet. I make fun and I say, don't wear your church bracelet. Those ones are too fat. They won't do the job.
Okay.
Take 2 rubber bands and wear them. I'm left-handed, so I wear them on my right because I use my left to pull. But if you're right-handed, you wear the rubber bands on your left. Every time your brain says to you, we are under tension, oh, I feel this, I feel that, let's go and do whatever your addiction is. Before, once your brain said that, you went ahead and did. But now your brain says, let's go. You pull the rubber band as far back as it can go and pow, hit yourself with it. Now, the power of addiction is secrecy.
Okay.
You keep it a secret, it holds you to ransom. If you pull and then the second thing you must do is to become brutally honest with yourself. If your brain tells you, let's do the cocaine now, 10 times a day, then you must commit to pulling that rubber band 10 times a day. Pull it. It's been known and proven scientifically to cut down cravings by 85% within the first 10 days.
Okay.
Just the rubber band alone, without even going to rehab. If you decide, I'm going to face this thing, in 10 days, you will cut down your cravings by 85%.
So what does pulling the rubber band do?
It's retraining the brain.
Okay.
The brain knows, oh, usually if I ask for cocaine, I got cocaine.
Okay.
Now I'm asking for cocaine, I'm getting pain.
Okay.
I don't like pain.
Understand. So as we round off, Chinedu, I'd like you to speak to someone who may be struggling, may be tempted to get into addiction. I know you said the images never really leave you. So what would you say to someone who's just been lured in?
First things first, they should listen to their inner self. Like Reverend Christie said, you can lie to everybody, but you can't lie to yourself. And whenever you find yourself doing certain things that are improper or certain behaviors that are actually
Destructive?
not destructive, not normal,
Okay.
I think you should talk to somebody. It's just basically about you. You have to respect, you have to understand yourself better than any other person. talk to somebody. You find yourself in a position where you're helpless. Reach out.
Okay.
Reach out. Anybody, your church coordinator. I found a lot of love in church.
Okay. Okay.
I found a lot of love. Like up to now, the love is still outpouring. It's not the outsiders, it's inside. I met Reverend Eno. Up to right now, she's been like a mother to me. Reverend Christie Bature, Pastor Emmanuel, a whole lot of them. They've been like family to me. And also God. Because I started reading my Bible, frankly. I started reading my Bible like virtually every day because I needed to get something. I'm not saying I'm better than anybody, but I just realized that I didn't find comfort anywhere.
Okay.
There were promises in the Bible that I read right now, and those promises, I actually have to have hope in them. They keep me going every day. I have to read about the lifestyles of men of God in the Bible and understand how their life went to. Everybody goes through struggle.
Yeah, that's true.
But you have to understand that it's part of life. But there are other ways for you to actually fight,
Come out.
deal with it.
Excellent. Chinedu, thank you so much for coming to share your story with us. It certainly touched me, and I'm sure it's been a blessing to our viewers. Reverend Christie, thank you for coming to teach us so much about addiction, and well done on the work that you're doing. Our viewers, this is the Colors of Life show. Thank you so much for being with us today. Follow us on our social media handles, and we look forward to being with you next week. Thank you.